Welcome to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannonohara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Hello and welcome, everybody. Let's get intimate. Welcome and thank you for joining me for another installment of the relationship series on the Consciousness Anywhere podcast. Today, I am joined by a very dear and very old colleague and friend of mine, Christopher Hughes.
Thanks for having me on.
Yay! And the reason I invited Chris, and I'm so glad that he's here, is the difference that Chris is. So today we're going to get into some juicy stuff. So let's start with, what is your relationship philosophy?
Good question. So backtracking slightly. My head is going in 1,000 directions when you ask that question. Do you ever have like areas in your life where everything is super easy and you have this sort of like savant capacity to create and things are just like they go and they're brilliant. And then you have your like Achilles heel area of life where you always seem to create disaster or trouble, or it's like the area where you're always thwarted in life. And that was always me with relationship until somewhat recently. Like relationship was that thing that I was slightly obsessed with, or I'd be like cruising along in my life, having a great time and creating and enjoying everything. And then I would meet somebody, fall in love and lose my absolute mind and become a crazy person. Yeah. And that's all really changed recently, thanks to a very diligent application of the tools of access consciousness to the rest of you. Dun, da, da, da. So I would have to say that my philosophy now is a relationship has to be an addition to your life and a contribution. And if there is anywhere that a relationship is asking you to not be who you really are, it ain't it.
Now, how would somebody, this question is going to sound weirdly obvious. And if people haven't done a lot of self-introspection and self-analysis, this question might not be that relevant. But for someone like you, who I know has done a lot of self-introspection and self-change, how do you know, like, what are some signs that you're losing yourself in the relationship, or you're not having all of you, or that relationship isn't contributing to you having all of you?
Yeah, awesome question. And I'm going to use some language that might not resonate with everybody, but to me, one of the most valuable things in a relationship and a hallmark of a relationship that's actually really working is where you feel completely safe. And even using the word feeling and safety are kind of loaded and maybe not the most expansive, light and bright kind of language that you can use. But what I mean by that is safety to me isn't like, okay, you're not going to get beat up or you're not going to get abused and trampled on, but you feel at ease and at peace to just totally be who you are. And you're never changing you or your actions to try and please somebody else or elicit their approval. Like, I'll give you an example of this. I have a friend who reached out to me not 2 days ago, and he's in a relationship that, from my perspective on the outside, is not working. And that's not a judgment, just is. And he was really upset that his partner was saying mean things to him and telling him he was stupid. And I said, hey, come here. I said, get away for a few days, get out of the kitchen and come hang out. We can go to the gym. We can go for walks. We can sit down and have a beer. And I'm happy to be an ear for you. And he said, no, I don't think that's a good idea, because I don't want to have to deal with how my partner will react. And I said, look, if you're not choosing something for how someone else will react, that's an abusive situation. So that word safety is, like I say, it's kind of a weird word to use because
it's very subjective as well.
It's subjective, and we are infinite beings wandering this planet and creating our realities with every choice that we make, right? And we never really need to be protected. It's sort of like insurance is, it's like, really? Isn't insurance and like a prenuptial, things like prenuptial agreements, aren't they like propelling and projecting into the future the disaster that's going to occur? Yeah, maybe. But what I mean by safety is not like that kind of safety, not like a security net, but where you feel at ease to be yourself and express who you are.
Yeah. And we could see how feeling at ease and being at peace in a relationship mightn't be a lot of people's targets, or they might not even desire it or know that it's possible due to the household they grew up in or what their sort of parents' relationships were like, because that mightn't have been a safe, peaceful space. So sort of not having peace and having a very charged interaction might actually feel more familiar and more like love. And that's why this conversation about relationship is, in my humble opinion, essential. Like, but if you could make essential like mean like it's like a pillar that like when it isn't working, it can really impact your entire existence. And the reason why I wanted to have you on here, Chris, is because we're having a lot of couples in the relationship series. And I also am inclusive of that there are other ways of creating our realities with relationship and being in the world sexually and in relationship that don't follow the standard model. And since my relationship from the outside looks like it follows the standard model, I have to include conversations with people who are an example of not following the standard model, since I get so much inspiration from you and your choices.
Yay.
So I'll do a little sharing, which is that it's like Chris has been an access consciousness facilitator for many, many years. And I first met Chris, we met in South Korea, like 40,000 years ago.
Oh my God. It's been more than 15 years.
Yeah. So we originally met in South Korea in an access class, and life just has continued onwards. You've been married and divorced in the subsequent time since. You've also have created your life in very interesting ways. You facilitate a lot of, in my opinion, very effective, very life-giving sex classes with the tools of consciousness. So if you were going to paint a picture for an extraterrestrial who just landed on planet Earth and knew nothing about our customs and our ways and our cultures, and they were asking you how people function, and it was your responsibility to teach them about the way we do relationship here, but from your perspective, not from what other people are doing, but from what you are inspired by in the area of relationship. And you can include sex if you want, and it might be more of a conversation that includes sex with you. What would you tell those extraterrestrials? How would you teach them about our ways?
Oh my goodness. I love that because it's almost like, what would you say to kids if you wanted to show them what a relationship could be?
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I would show them what, like, gosh, I've come to a place recently where I'm so good on my own. I'm really happy. And I have plenty of lovers and plenty of sexual partners, but I don't have a primary relationship. And what I would say to them or anybody is, you don't need anyone. And if you have space for somebody and you desire to have somebody, then they better add something. They better make things greater rather than just be a distraction or take up space.
So how did you get to that awareness, that choice, that place in your life?
I was making myself absolutely insane in the areas of relationship. And
Right, which you forementioned.
it was overtaking my whole life. Like it
Can
was,
you give some examples?
yeah. So I got divorced and I thought, oh, I am this, like, this is all going to sound like judgment. And it was, and it is. I was like, I'm this middle-aged, overweight white guy who suddenly is single again. I passed my prime? I'm not as pretty as I was as when I was 20. Is anyone going to want to play with me, or like what's going to
Yeah.
be the go?
Yeah. But
And
thank you for saying that though, Chris. Thank you for putting that out there. Because let's face it, like how many of you guys can relate to, I can totally relate to what you're saying. I'll speak for myself.
yeah, well, I know a lot of people that are in long-term relationships and marriages who are miserable, but are terrified of leaving because of
They're past their
stepping into.
prime. Yeah.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
they're worried about economics, or they're like, yeah, all of those things, or even just the familiarity of a relationship. So I got divorced and went, whoa, and stepped out into this big bad world of dating and did the dating apps and met all these different people and fell for some people that were totally unsuited to me, and um, got my heart broken a few times, and got my heart broken to the extent that I went, enough.
Hmm.
I'm not doing this anymore, and I'm not functioning from the need of anyone any longer. There
Hmm.
is room in my life for somebody if it's a contribution and I get to be all of me. But if not, I'm actually really happy on my own. I've built a life that I am excited about every morning, that I'm thrilled about, that I get to have fun in. And I have this incredible network of beings to play with and create with and enjoy my life with and have sex with. And none of it is what you see in movies as what a relationship is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But the key element that I really want to like reiterate for people is the need aspect.
Hmm.
What's been so freeing to me as a being is to no longer have that in my world. I really do not need anyone. And that I have this peace with
Mm-hmm.
me now as a result. And I have built a life that's really fun based on it. Like, I didn't realize in the past how many things that I was doing to try and
Hmm.
find somebody, even friends, not even just romantic partners, but friends that would validate me and affirm me and prove that I wasn't alone.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Okay. So what you have mentioned the need thing, which is really helpful and frankly huge, like
Mm.
just massive. Um, if somebody knows that they're different, and I'm going to say you're different. Like, of course, people who are listening to this who don't know Chris, you wouldn't really know. Like, I know how different Chris is because I've known Chris for decades and I know you. And for those out there that know that they're different, that they don't seem to be able to make the standard model work for them, or they just don't even have a desire for the standard model, but they're constantly living in conflict that the standard model, they should fit the standard model, but they don't fit the standard model. And and let's just say like there is another possibility. How would people who know they don't fit the standard model or who don't even want the standard model, what are some ways that they can start looking at creating what's possible for them that might be different?
Yeah. So I had a conversation with your dad, Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, that changed my whole life when it comes to this. I was talking to him about how unassailable he is, how he's always like willing to reach for more, willing to keep going, willing to keep striving for what he knows is possible and real. And that might seem a little bit like macro to people when we're looking at relationships. And I said, yeah, so how did you create that? How did you create that? I think the word I used was confidence in yourself with what you're choosing. And he said, it's easy for me because I know where I'm going. He said, you let yourself get distracted and you let yourself fall off your path and have some pretty boy distract you because you don't know where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know where you're going, where you're clear on what it is you want to create as your life, as your future, as your business, as your body, as you just know what you want to create. Because you sat down and gone, hey, the menu's infinite. I can have anything I want as my life, and the universe will support me in having that. What do I want?
Mm.
And that has been a turning point for me of going, okay, I'm clear now what it is that where I'm going. And so every choice that is presented to me on my travels, on my adventure of life, I can look at each choice and go, does this get me further to where I'm going, or is it just a distraction?
Mm.
And choose things based on that. So when a relationship comes along, when someone comes along that wants to play, whether it's for an evening or whether it's for the next decade, I look at each of those situations and go, is this a contribution? Does this further me down the path to where I'm going? Or is this something totally different?
Oh,
Because
I freaking love that. I
so
love
many
that.
people, they choose relationship for the validation of it and for the like, it's almost this like band-aid to not be alone anymore.
Well,
And
and the distraction, as you said, relationship can be a phenomenal distraction. I do this thought experiment with myself where I fantasize about if we had universities dedicated to stuff like relationship and parenting. I fantasize about the parenting one a lot, actually, and I have a lot of very, I think, polarizing points of view about parenting in terms of like people who are only, this is a complete aside, but not really because it's, parents are our first primary relationships. Like, wouldn't it be cool if the people who actually like had parenting capabilities were the ones who were the parents, and the people who really don't enjoy parenting didn't have to?
right. Like imagine if we operated like a tribe and there were people in the tribe that were great parents. So if you had kids, you were like, here,
Yeah. And
you're
so
good at take them.
I think about a lot, like, what if we did as many years of university for knowing how to be in relationship, create in relationships, honor the people we're in relationships with, not dishonor us in relationships, like literally going through a university course for relationship. And then and only then are you sort of like, do you have the credentials? Because you have yourself, then you can add a relationship. Which is really the back to front that most people do it. They sort of get into a relationship regardless of the condition of their own universe. And in an ideal world, the relationship could and would, in theory, contribute to you gaining more of you, right? That's the vision, the dream, the hope, and the wish. And we just don't see that very often. And I posit that a lot of that is due to what you're indicating about what Dad said about he knows where he's going. And so that's something that you had to take into consideration. Yeah, like, where am I going? Where am I going in life? And just that very question makes you a better potential friend, partner, lover, contribution to everything in the universe, because you can actually gift of yourself from that space.
Yeah. We should write a letter to somebody who, like the people who make schools. And that's what elementary school should be. Like, do we really need to learn math and stuff? I mean, yeah, we do
Oh,
eventually,
don't
but
get me started. Don't get me started.
wouldn't it be better if we spent those like formative years in our lives learning how to be with each other rather than like and learning how to actually like ourselves enough that we weren't waiting for someone to come along and show us that we had value, so then we would like ourselves. Like
Yeah.
that to me is the thing with relationships that really just bites most people in the butt is that they're waiting for somebody else to show them they have value. But if that's what you're doing, what do you actually have to offer in a relationship? Like, and once you actually like yourself enough that you could be good in a relationship, you realize, oh, I don't actually need it.
Exactly. Which is the freedom that I love, which is the freedom that both of us really have and really, but we've earned it. We've walked through the valley of fire barefoot to get to the place of liking ourselves enough to not need, be able to choose.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Shannon in another outfit and another time and place. If you're enjoying these relationship-focused podcasts, I invite you to check out all of the sex and relationship content, previously conducted classes, and access consciousness classes that I have available for all of you on my website. It will be linked below. If you're ready to really begin to unwind, unlock, and transform the places where you've been stuck in creating the kind of relationships that make your life easier, if you haven't enjoyed sex, if you go crazy in any of these areas, please recognize you're not alone. These areas can be extremely rewarding, and they can also be extremely difficult. The more of you have, the easier these areas become. Who did you learn about relationship from? Did you receive an education about the kind of sex and copulation that would heal your body, create more joy for you and the other, and create more space, peace, and possibility? What kind of sexual education were you ever given? It's like, where do you go to access what's light and not constantly be in reaction to the projections, the expectations, the heavy, and the difficulty, the secrets, the control that can exist so dynamically in the area of sex and relationship? Check out these classes if you would like to change your life. So, if choice was the point of relationships, just thought experiment, because the point of relationships is different for everybody, but let's just do an experiment here. If choice was the whole point of relationships, if relationships were for creating more choice in the universe, not just for the two individuals, but for everything in the universe, what choice could you make or would you make to create that?
You know how we were talking about knowing where you're going? Like, the thing that has spurred me on the most in my journey to consciousness is communion. It's oneness. It's the reality that separation is not real. Like, I remember when I was 18, I hitchhiked across Canada and probably on too many drugs. And I ended up in this like burned out, dilapidated church in the middle of Montreal, Canada, with these people that I met. And the church was all burned and falling apart, and it was probably a death trap for us to be in there. But someone had spray painted across what once was the altar of this church. They'd spray painted, "We're all in this together." And I was like, in an ideal world, yeah, but that's not how most people are functioning. Most people are like so insular and so separate in who they are. There's something beautiful and powerful and amazing available when we pool our consciousness and that consciousness as a resource so that we could create something bigger and something greater beyond just ourselves. But no one teaches us that. They teach us either to be self-sacrificing and give up ourselves for everybody else and the greater good that doesn't include us, or to be completely narcissistic and make everything about us as though that is having some sense of esteem. Where I'm going, like I said, where I'm headed with my life and my consciousness is I would like to create an undefined reality that is inclusive.
Mm-mm-mm.
Inclusive of me, inclusive of you, inclusive of every molecule of creation that would like to be included. So when we include each other and we have that communion that we talk about, relationship as it is presented in this reality, like the exclusive coupledom where someone gives you a toaster because you got married, it becomes kind of irrelevant. Like whatever. In oneness, in consciousness, does it matter if we're married?
Exactly. And thank you. That in oneness and consciousness doesn't matter. And this is where I actually would love to start this conversation from. So if you were teaching one of the university courses in the University of Relationship, let's say you were teaching the communion class because you started with communion. That was where you came from, the choice, the if relationship created more choice. You brought forward the possibility of communion, and you were teaching that university class. What would be like on the syllabus on the very first day of that class? Where would you start that conversation?
I would start that conversation by showing people what I see engagement as. See, we've talked about communion. We've talked about oneness. We've talked about being like an infinite being, which to me, if we're infinite beings, we are like intrinsic in everything, right? Every molecule of creation is in us and we are in every molecule of creation. But we rarely get there. What we usually do is we stand awestruck and humbled by everyone else and everything else, and we assume everything is greater than us. And we rarely go, hang on though, so am I. So what I would start with is inviting people to really truly receive and just drop their barriers and be present for everything and the gift that it is. Let that in, but also let you out. Like I had a conversation with your dad, a 7-day event that we had in New Zealand years ago now. And I said to him, I always feel so separate. I always feel so alone and so isolated, and I hate it. It is what makes me depressed and anxious and makes me want to kill myself, is that this sense of being so like a moon in orbit of everything else that's happening. And I said, I want to let everyone in. And he went, no, you don't. Because you do that. But you do it from this position of orbit. You're standing outside, letting everything in, being present for it, experiencing everybody else. What you don't do is let you out. You don't let everyone else have you, and actually grab a glove, get in the game, and be a part of the world around you. Get in there. Let you out, because you actually are a gift, but you keep yourself reserved and hidden and separate. And if you went, hey, here I am.
Okay.
You could contribute.
So can you share some of the tools, or one of the essential, or even just one tool or something that you use successfully in that process of transformation for you?
Yep. I made it a target of mine to let go of all of the shame and all of the fear that I was functioning from to keep me separate. Because we think if we actually let people know us and we actually let us out into the world, they would reject us and we'd be alone. Like that we would get judged and we would then lose something. It's almost always seemingly we think we're going to lose something if we actually let people know us. And I'm like, huh? Where does that come from? And to me, shame and fear they have a lot to answer to when it comes to that.
Well, it's really interesting too what you're indicating about letting yourself out. And it sounds to me like, well, I would say that thing of not letting yourself out means that you're going to the College of Judges, not the College of Consciousness, the conscious relationship.
Yeah.
And I just want to, I think I just want to reemphasize and reiterate, since what I believe you're indicating is a rather very simple, but very kind of complex and dynamic uh, self-directed transformation, in that the first step in relationship for you is communion. And to achieve communion, first you have to receive, which is what you said, and let yourself out.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with the relationship. That has everything. Well, it has everything to do with your relationship with you and sort of the choice you allow yourself to have about being you.
Yeah. And another way to say that is let people actually have you. Let people get to know who you are. And like I said, I always grew up like feeling like I was an observer. Like I remember reading Andy Warhol's autobiography, or it was his journal, I think, that he published. And he said, I've been everywhere and I've seen everything, and I was never a part of any of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yep, I get you. So that side of it, of like actually stepping out and letting people have you, how can anyone really fall in love with you if you never let them know who you are?
Yeah. And that takes a lot of courage too, because you are then exposing yourself to the college of judgment, right? Because how many of us have let ourselves out to somebody we thought cared about us, and then what we got in return was sort of like not the communion of honor, but the control of judgment.
And the control of judgment and the rejection, which we thought was an invalidation of us.
Right. But was it actual?
No.
Right. And so something that we
just can't have us. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything about them or anything about you. It just, that wasn't it.
Yeah. And something I think that it would be worth mentioning is that when others reject us, it actually, like you said, has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with us. It's an indication of what that other person can't have. And these are the essential elements of what I believe would be in a university course for conscious relationships. It's, these are we say these things, but if you really know that people, when they're judging you, they're demonstrating what's going on in their world. They're not actually indicating something about you. Isn't that kind of important to know? Isn't that kind of essential?
And like you said, I learned that the hard way, girl. Like I got my heart broke so bad in the last year, and I'm grateful because what I got from that and where I am now as a result, I wouldn't trade it for the world. But I met this person who was basically terrified of me because of how much I am and how much I'm willing to be and how big my life is. And they went, oh, wow. The sex is awesome, but I can't fathom what you can. And they ended up rejecting me. And it took me longer than I care to admit to go, wait, what if there's actually nothing wrong with me and this wasn't actually about me, and their rejection of me does not make me any less of a person? Like you asked earlier, when you know you're different, like I'm in like in whatever, any stretch of any metric you want to apply, I'm pretty different.
Yeah.
And as a result, that idea of the prince on a horse and the twin flame and the soulmate and finding your match, I've had to kind of let all that go and realize when you're as different as you are, it's never about finding someone who can match you. Because when you're so actualized as a being, all you can do is hope for other beings who are willing to be more of who they are to enjoy yourselves with. If that isn't too like remote an example.
Well, that sounds like a very peaceful place and space, which
Mm,
I love and totally value.
mm.
And I think both of us are very cognizant of that seems maybe like a fantasy, but I'd rather have that fantasy of relationship than the fantasy of, like you said, the prince on the horse, that living happily ever after thing, which I'm sorry. Isn't that done now? Like, isn't that so
Yeah.
fucking like, hasn't that played itself out? Now, okay, now what else is possible? And we're positing, and this is the thing about these conversations on relationship in the relationship series through the lens of consciousness, is we are positing that through the
Aus- auspices is how I would pronounce it.
auspices, through the auspices of consciousness, relationship would not be something that you did because you needed it. It would be something that you chose to cooperate with in whatever constellation and dynamic served the greater good for however long it did.
And that I'm so glad you added that last element. For however long it did. I thought it was amazing when I got divorced, how many people came to me and said, I'm so sorry it didn't work out. And it made me go, what do you mean? It worked out for 10 years and then it didn't work anymore. Like, why? Where did we buy that longevity and permanence is what gives a relationship value? If,
College
like,
judges, baby.
I was stuck in Hong Kong last week. First world problem, total first world problem. There was a cyclone in Brisbane and I couldn't fly home. So I was stuck in Hong Kong.
Yes.
I met this young man who changed my life with the tenderness that he was, with the intimacy he was willing to have, with the kindness he was with my body when we had sex. And I doubt I'll ever speak to him again. But I don't care. It
Well,
was
you
such,
do care, but you don't need to speak to him again.
I don't need to speak to him again. I'd be happy to. But
Yep.
also, what I got from that afternoon was so beautiful and so kind.
Hmm.
And what I'm really grateful for is it didn't make me go, well, then lock that shit down. Let's let's
Right.
let's let's make sure that this stays and hold on to this forever because
Yeah. Well, this brings me to something interesting that I also believe that would be included in the College of Conscious Relationships is knowing the difference between short-term, midterm, and long-term relationships, and recognizing that there's a place for each of them and they all add in the way that they do. And the reason you need to know the difference between short-term, midterm, and long-term relationships is so you don't try to make your short-term relationships into long-term relationships and vice versa. Because what I would also say is, don't you that was a gift of a short-term, you could call it a relationship. It was just a short-term gift. And that gift keeps on giving. But I know you also have people in your life who are long-term relationships that you're not potentially copulating with. And I
yeah,
say potentially because the potential is always there. But I know
always,
for you, the potential is always there, but they're not
always.
necessarily relationships that include copulation. So you do have long-term relationships. Um,
Yep.
but you also are inclusive of short-term relationships, which I think is very exciting and something that we potentially lose as we get older.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like you keep referring to this course as like a university course, but I'm still on the bandwagon of let's make this elementary school.
Yes.
Because remember that like reality that you'd have on the playground where you'd like see someone across the playground that was playing a certain game or a certain sport or whatever that you were like, oh, I'm into that right now. And you'd run over and you'd be like, hey, can I join? And you'd enjoy that for 30 minutes until you were done. And there never needed to be this like, I'm over you, we're finished moment. You'd just be like, thanks, bye. And then you maybe would resume later and maybe you wouldn't. And it didn't matter.
And if that's your reality, like the thing I think that I want to really emphasize is that right now you're presenting a specific reality and possibility that isn't necessarily for everybody, but it is for some people. And if this is a reality that resonates with you, that you feel like you're getting pieces of what's more true for you in this conversation, do you have you had the sense that you're supported to have that in society? And if it is important for you to give yourself permission, no, Chris and I'll speak for Chris, but I know this to be true. Chris and I would love to be and do and create anything. We would love to be anything that we can for each and every one of you to have more of what's true for you.
Yep. And I'm so glad you said that part again, Shannon. You're brilliant. You're amazing. You inspire me so much. There's no right way. Like, I know people who have been in monogamous exclusive relationships and marriages and for their entire life. Like, I've got this one guy who works for me at the Antique Guild in Australia, and I call him my diversity hire because he's the only straight white Christian man on staff. And
Yes.
he's such a gift. And I love the guy dearly for what he creates and what he's willing to be. And he has had sex with one person in his life, and that's his wife. And he waited until marriage to have sex. And I was like, wow, brother, we are so different. It's March, and I counted since January 100 sexual partners this year so far. And you've had sex with one person and waited till marriage. We are so different. But I don't have the point of view that I'm right. Like, a lady came to me who has wanted to do one of my sex classes, and she said, I'm embarrassed. And I went, why? Are you into some kinky shit? And she said, no, I'm in my 50s and I've never had sex.
Yeah.
And I went, cool. She said, what do you mean, cool? I went, you don't have to. She said, and she started crying, and she said, I've booked so many private sessions with facilitators who've tried to process me into having sex. And you're the first person who's come along who said, okay, so what? You're not wrong. Do you want to have sex? And she went, no, I don't. Sometimes like the idea of like going for dinner with somebody, but I'm not interested in sex. I went, cool. There's no right or wrong way here.
Yeah, and I'm really actually glad you brought up sex, because I was hoping that we would get to add some of that to this conversation, because in my humble opinion, you are really so clear and clean when you facilitate about sex. If anybody listening to this, I just want to say, like, stuff for finding Chris's resources, the gifts that Chris offers in the form of classes and content will be linked below the YouTube video. So if you're listening to this on a platform that isn't YouTube, I actually think it'll be linked there too. You know what? I am not the authority on the logistics on these things, but Chris's stuff will be linked. And you can find Christopher Hughes out there in the world, because we are not trying to hide our difference, and we're doing everything we can to offer what we can. We're letting ourselves out. So when it comes to, and I just think I need to change tack here slightly, and also give a little bit of context for relationship and sex are two different areas, which is why the sex conversation would be a different university course, or would be a different course. Relationships can include copulation and sex, but they don't obviously all include copulation and sex. And copulation and sex doesn't always equal relationship, as so many of you guys listening probably know. You can have amazing copulation with somebody who you do not have an amazing relationship with, and vice versa. So if you were going to, would you indulge us and do us a little treat and give a little sex soliloquy for those who are interested in listening to a different possibility within that arena?
Yes, absolutely. So when I was a boy, we had a teacher come to our elementary school to teach us about sex. They did the sex education part. And who did they send to teach us about sex?
A priest.
Yeah. No, it was a Catholic nun.
Okay. I knew that. I knew there was some religious thing coming.
Yeah, they sent a woman who'd never had sex to teach us about sex. And she said, the best form of contraception is an orange. We went, what? And she said, you don't have it before, you don't have it after, you have it instead of sex. It was like, okay, that's what we're receiving as an education. And that's in the progressive Western world. Those of you who grew up in the Muslim world or in the, in different parts with different religious points of view around sex, some of you got even less education than that. But regardless of where you're from or what your background was, most of us didn't get a really clear, clean, honest education around what sex is, can, and could be. And we get a lot of projected conflictual information about what is the correct amount of sex, what we should be doing, what you should be doing based on your gender. If you're having too much sex, you're bad. If you're not having enough sex, you're bad. If you're having, like, it's so bizarre. There's so much conflictual stuff. And nobody out there, with the exception of me and a few other facilitators like you, Shannon, are saying, you're allowed to have your own reality with this. And you're allowed to find out what's true for you. And a shocking number of people out there, for all of our gentle listeners, their first experience of sex was actually sexual violence or non-consensual sex. Yeah. And that probably taught you, was a bit of a injustice for teaching you what sex could be and really isn't. So
what would you love to share with people about sex?
That what sex really is feels more like walking through the forest than anything else. That sex is about a kindness and a relaxation and almost that energy I was speaking to earlier of allowing yourself to receive and also be received. That's what sex and copulation could be. And that it doesn't have to be a race to the finish line or a reason to beat yourself up that you're not doing it right, that you can really take some time and find out what's true for you and what you actually want to be, do, have, and enjoy. It is about being kind and gifting to each other, but you also, again, to circle back, have got to include you in that and find out what you would like.
Thank you, my friend. That's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
How does it get better? And what else is possible? So if any of you guys listening would like more of this information, this energy, this possibility, check out what Chris has to offer. Check out what I have to offer. We are aware, Chris and I are very personally aware of the anti-kindness in sex realities. We are very aware of the anti-consciousness that goes on in the relationships in our life. We live in a world that is full of magic and possibility, and a world that's also full of insanity. And what I think I really want to emphasize that this is not a conversation about like replacing, like putting a layer of positivity over a lot of trauma that anyone has experienced or continues to perpetrate on themselves in relationship and sex. This is a conversation about a completely different possibility where those of us that choose will unwind from what we've been stuck with, that creates less of us in the universe rather than more of what's greater for everybody in the universe.
That feels so nice.
And on that note, we love you. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. How does it get better than this? Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who you know who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on Shannon-Ohara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.